Hey, good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I am your podcast host, Danny Vicente, and this is Coffee and Conversations, a place where we explore topics in technology, leadership, and innovation. Discussions about things that are keeping you up at night with industry experts, technology experts, and so much more. So grab your cup of coffee and join us as we dive in. You're going to have a couple of familiar faces on here. One being Ken Martin, Cisco, and Graeme from Wipro. Both of these gentlemen have taken time out of their busy schedule to join us as they are prepping for some mega events. But I'm going to have them introduce themselves here in a moment. Ken, why don't you kick us off?
Hey everyone, Ken Martin, Managing Director of our Sport, Media, and Entertainment industry practice here at Cisco.
Fantastic. And Graeme?
Graeme Brown, I'm the Executive Director of Wipro Vision Edge, which is the dynamic digital signage solution at Wipro and Cisco.
Awesome. And if you guys are familiar with our previous conversations with Ken in the sports arena, we talk about digital signage quite a bit. And I'm going to let Ken, I'm going to let you kind of tee this up here with why we should care, why we're talking about digital signage, and then I'm going to ask kind of the elephant in the room question, and then we'll kick things off from there.
Fair enough. Well, look, unless you've been hiding under a rock, digital signage is everywhere now. We started off a decade ago, seeing it in sports venues, primarily in the bowl, and it made its way into the concourse. And then we started exploring reasons why, or how you can monetize the solution. And the more we realized, it's not just in sponsorship activation, which is the obvious. How can you use a digital signage to create a digital menu, to now social media boards, to the ability to know how many people in the venue and where and how long the lines are, and I mean it goes on and on and on. Wayfinding to gaming to everything in between. So it's but that's the sports and entertainment business. Now you could walk into any airport, mall, casino, hospitality, and digital is there. Why? Because it's the single most impactful way to advertise to anybody, whether it's personal advertising, broadcast, sponsorship, whatever. Far beyond anything that we do in print, radio, ad, or a traditional form of advertisement. So now it's not a solution that's so dedicated to sports, so to speak. It's a solution that's evolved into basically every industry out there.
So with that said, then I think there's a sizable market, and here comes the elephant in the room. I hear it repeatedly that Cisco's walking away from this or removing themselves from this arena. Is that an accurate assessment?
No. Let me repeat that. No. Look, it's if you look at the industry trends and you read the data that's out there available to anybody, this is set to be over a $50 billion business. Digital signage is set to be a $50 billion business in the next 5 years. Cisco's played an important role into this in this solution for well over a decade now, and when working with hundreds of teams all around the globe, producing what we just talked about, which is incremental revenue driven through digital signage. Being an industry leader, being somebody that I believe we changed the market of taking and monetizing the digital experience far beyond the pitch and the inner bowl into the concourse and into your concession stands there. Why in the world would we walk away? That's simply just not, our idea of a good time. This is why, we've accelerated this, our market and, where we're at with this and the solutions that we provide and, in partnership with Wipro now.
That's a Great answer. And I wanted to address that right out the gate because, as you both know, we hear that conversation quite a bit. And as much as we want to tell folks, I want to remind them that we are not leaving and we are here to stay. But you just mentioned the partnership with Wipro, and I think this is a perfect transition to Graeme. And Graeme, can you tell us what that partnership's about and what Wipro is doing with Vision Edge?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a little background on me. I mean, I was with Cisco for 10 years, running the services for the sports media entertainment and digital signage specifically. And from that, and when the partnership occurred between Wipro and Cisco, actually a little background there, Wipro has been doing the development on Stadium Vision, Cisco Vision for a very long time. So that partnership has been in place for a very long time. And what we found recently was the opportunity to be able to expand on that partnership and really allow Wipro to have a little skin in the game as well, in that they can then put more resources into the game and make sure that this digital signage solution is best in class and continues to be best in class. What I think is really important to note here is just the ability to scale. I think what Wipro brings to the table is 250,000 employees. I mean, the opportunity to take our development core team from 10, 12 to 75 overnight was what we did with this particular solution. And what Ken and I obviously talk a lot every day, and I have my Cisco hat on and my Wipro hat on, and we talk through how we can make this solution better. And one of the things that really I was really excited about, and the reason why I wanted to engage and continue and go to in Wipro to be able to engage and expand on what we were doing with Vision Edge, is the ability to innovate. I saw a cartoon recently. It was who wants innovation, and everyone's like, yeah, I want innovation. And it's like, who wants to innovate? And they're all like, I don't know if I want to innovate. And who wants to pay for it? And it's like, nobody, right? So the idea that we can innovate continuously, I mean, that's the reason why I get up in the morning, is to think about ways we could take digital signage, which we do best in class and we have for the last decade plus, and continue to drive innovation, do things that other people aren't thinking about, and be able to bring that to our customers so that we can do really cool things. Because in the end of the day, to realize the TAM, realize the opportunity, the $50 billion by 2031, to realize that opportunity in digital out of home, you have to innovate. You can't just be stagnant and keep on doing the same things you've always been doing before. So the partnership really lends itself to that.
Now, Ken, you and I have talked in the past about how digital is 3x more effective than traditional. I've got to think there's more to it than just digital signage, the big scoreboard in the sky. When we're talking about digital signage, what makes it special? What's the secret sauce behind digital signage?
Well, it's a canvas. I mean, if you get the right system, you can do whatever you want. It could be educational. It could be, something that drives safety and awareness. It could be something that, if you use analytics on, digital signage, it can pick up your emotions and, triggers to, some kind of content that's more personalized to maybe the mood that you're in. Or who the audience is in any one given, take a fast serve restaurant, where an audience, that they, or guests that they may have in the morning may be different than guests in the afternoon. Same thing with the shopping mall. The shoppers in the morning are different than your afternoon, maybe your evening traffic. But the screen itself should be used as a canvas. It could be anything you want to whoever you want, whenever you want. And that's the beauty of it. A print ad, a backlit sign, a poster, these are all fixed real estate assets that seen once, you might pay attention to, seen 3 to, half a dozen times, you ignore it. It becomes part of the paint on the wall. If you're doing, digital signage the right way, you continuously change the content on the screens. You make it more personalized, and you make it dynamic in something that somebody pays attention to, and that's for a fact. We just know that the power of digital is to get somebody's attention, as a starting point.
So it's safe to say then that this isn't just a sponsorship aspect. There is a customer, a fan, an interaction from your customer or your fan in the venue or store, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, it depends on who you're sitting in front of. Everybody gets benefit from it. If I walk into an airport, I'm talking to somebody that's responsible for flight information. This is the perfect system, to educate people that are walking up to the counter, or somebody that's walking, down to their flight, to know exactly the status of the flight, where the flight's coming from, boarding times and everything else. If I'm talking to a sponsor of a team, it's how do I market your brand differently? How do I make it to where you can actually determine the effectiveness of your brand? Um, Depending on when we advertise your brand in the venue. Um, so yes, it's a value add to everybody, and that's we think of it, and we coined this term a number of years ago, working with a company, Sport Innovation Lab that we produced a report with. And basically said, start treating your venue as a media platform, or at least, transform your venue into a media platform. That's not, a sponsorship, billboard. It's a media platform for, wayfinding to, informational safety and security, like I had mentioned.
I love that. And Graham, what are you seeing on your end as far as innovation in some of these other areas?
Well, I mean, the platform concept goes across not only venues as a media platform, but retail, transportation, all of these different sectors fall into the same category. It just happens that sports was a little bit early, right? Early to the game as far as selling sponsorship and activating and doing fan experience, et cetera. But when we were just at NRF talking to all of our retail customers, and they're talking about the same thing. It's very cutting edge in retail right now to have this ad platform that you control. And I think with what I'm seeing a lot more of, which is exciting, is that people are realizing, our customers and retailers or sports teams, et cetera, are realizing that the more screen real estate they control, the more that they can control and influence their customers. And that is either to buy things that they're sponsoring or to, engage within compelling content. And that really circles around to the innovation part for me, which is, so you have more screens and you need more content. And how are you creating that content and how are you working with content, which really is the next, frontier of important elements to this whole situation, which is digital signage and having an ad network.
Yeah, look how it's playing out in, education alone. Years ago, when we started calling on universities, we'd go in as because of the familiarity that we had with sports, we'd go in and say, hey, look, this is the perfect solution for your stadium. But if you think about it, in the world of the university space, even the big house, in Michigan, which holds 111,000 people, only gets used 7 times a year. So it's hard to justify just buying it for the big house. But if you start thinking about the campus, and University of Michigan's a good one because the campus is so large, you think about how digital signage is being used in education to inform the students, at and around campus, whether they walk into the bookstore or just in the classroom alone. And you start thinking about this is the perfect platform to be able to push whatever information we need to it. So what once was developed for the great world of sports and how they use it to advertise and generate revenue, it's becoming equally as important, in the classroom. So, a campus, a university campus would benefit in a number of different ways of having this type of platform in place.
Yeah, and I guess that brings me to something you mentioned the other day, Graham. And you talked about having this platform and, as an example, showcasing an advertisement for a vehicle in a retail environment, but they don't actually sell the vehicle, or in a restaurant, or in a sporting event, or on a college campus. And you talked about that a little bit, and I'd love for you to expand upon that because I think something Ken said there just triggered that in my mind. And
Yeah, it's an interesting concept and something we learned, over the years we worked in sport, which is the endemic versus non-endemic advertising. So endemic being something you're selling, you're advertising, so that whoever is your customer can purchase what you're advertising on your screens in the place that you're advertising it. Non-endemic being the opposite. So you're advertising things that you don't even sell, or maybe adjacencies to your particular products, for example. So in sports, we've been doing this for years. We talked about this, and it's around, you're not buying a car at a professional sports game at a stadium, but you're being advertised to buy the car. And that's because you have, compelling feelings about the team, and they know the metrics around that. But we're seeing that same concept start to spill over into retail, where retailers are starting to think about how they can advertise elements or things to their customer that they're not even selling. And that really opens up their opportunity to recognize revenue or make revenue. And that's really the key here, is when that framework starts to switch with the retailers, which it has, and in transportation, which it is, then they start to realize this ad platform is really, really powerful and very lucrative.
I have to ask a question. As you both are talking there, I can't help but put myself into a customer's shoes. And I think, okay, I can recognize the opportunity. I can see what you guys are talking about. But man, now I've got to become a content house. And maybe I feel overwhelmed by that. What do you guys say in that environment?
I mean, so in sports, I mean, to your point, they've had some time to build up their content distribution, content house. They have sponsorship, they have content creators. This is something that they do. It's part of their general day to day. You get into retail, which has that. I mean, they have marketing people, and they have that kind of institutionalized marketing. And transportation maybe a little bit less. So what we're doing from an innovation perspective is starting to think about content and how it's created and how you can use. So we have an omni-channel tool that we're about to release, where you can take a piece of content that's made for social and it reformats it for different sizes. And this kind of workflow enablement is really the innovation piece that I enjoy, and something that I think people should get excited about, which is how to make the lives of the operators, the lives of the people creating content easier, so that you can create more content, so that you can operate more screens, etc. And that's really the main goal. Absolutely.
Yeah, I would say, look, if you look at the traditional way of advertising to your TV set, it's music and, getting the right actors to say the right things, and, that kind of. If you're talking about a large public venue, whether it be a convention center, mall, airport, casino, sporting event, you have to be able to deliver your message in a way that's effective without sound, because you're not going to hear it. You know what I mean? If the TV's turned full blast, you're not going to hear the advertisement. So you have to create content in a way that's compelling, that catches your attention, that is able to deliver your message silently. And that's tough to do, right? It's tough for somebody, especially in a large public venue that's not used to that, right? They used to go from a static sign to a digital. How do I make digital ads impactful, but don't have all the sound to it? I can't tell my story. I have to show my story, right? And it takes some time for people to to cross that chasm, if you will, to get over into that side of it's a whole new way of advertising. But I will tell you, there's two people that are influenced here. One is the people that are actually creating the content to deliver, and the sponsors that are actually paying for the content, right? So I want to make sure that you're delivering my message in an effective way. Well, it's not like they have a file that's produced with no sound, no video, no actual speaking, and they send it to the people that work at these stadiums as an example and say, okay, there you go. So I think that one of the biggest hurdles is not the features that or functionality that you can get out of digital signage today. It's you got to get your mind around that content and how to best produce that content in a meaningful way.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I would definitely double down on that. I mean, I think the propensity to try to think that television advertising translates into digital signage is something we see a lot, and it's not true. And to Ken's point, the more we can give customers and agencies and sponsors tools to be able to make the appropriate advertising, and the tools may be software tools, but they also could be services and et cetera, all the things that go together to make a really good bundled package of how you do this is really important, so that when they're spending money on advertising, they're doing it effectively. And that's really the key.
I love that. And folks, if you are hearing anything and have any questions, please use the links down below. We will have a link to Cisco's page as well as Wipro's, and as usual, an Ask Us questions. If you ask us anything there that we don't get to on this podcast, we will try to answer them in subsequent ones. Okay, so Ken, I want to double down on something you were talking about when it comes to content, because you brought up a good point in that there is no sound. You brought up a point of it being dynamic and personalized, and that screens are becoming more prevalent everywhere. So it sounds like the complexity of the content is increasing day by day. How do we address that?
I'll let Graeme go.
Hilarious. The content itself, I mean, as far as the complexity of the content, I mean, we talked briefly about the tools available to people to be able to create more content more readily. But the philosophy around content, the medium is the message, etc. I mean, if you know any of your, content theory, it's important to note how people react to content, how they engage with content, how, I went to film school, so that was my background. In film school, we always learned that you had to be able to read something once and a half again in order before it went away. So, interesting concept around you start putting content up on screens. If people read the message, how are you supposed to expect them to engage? Because one of the most important parts about content is some sort of call to action. I mean, if there's no call to action and there's no readability, then really you don't have something other than, it's not really content. I mean, it's content in the truest form, but it's not really something that's engageable. And so having things like one really interesting side note about content. I mean, QR codes are a really interesting phenomenon to me, because in Europe they used QR codes for years and years before they ever became popular in North America. But the pandemic has really allowed us to have this like uptick of engagement with QR codes. I think it's like 1,000% uptick of how Americans will use QR codes. So that whole concept to me is that call to action, because we went for many years with like a URL or some sort of call to action, go here. Well, that QR code is that it's like a true call to action. And so if someone is on a concourse walking, I mean, it's a wonderful way to get them to engage. And further to that, I mean, there's a bunch of different other ways, but with digital signage, with no sound, you have to have it legible, something readable, something simple. Get your logo in early. I mean, this is something that I see a lot of when people are making content and they do this in television. So this is why television ads don't work very well in digital signage, is because what you're generally doing in television ad is doing some sort of preamble messaging, and then you show your logo. Well, you've wasted a lot of valuable time in digital signage if you're not showing your logo right off the top. So getting right to the message that you actually want to impart on the customer, and then give them some sort of call to action. Those are the really important elements of content. And without that, you end up with white noise. And we see that with a lot of poor content creation. It's just white noise content. The other thing I will mention here is adding valuable elements to the content for the person consuming the content. So for example, just straight sponsorship is actually not that compelling, because after a while it becomes the white noise. What you really want to do is start to think about how, maybe there's a social media element to the content. So you're doing the sponsorship activation, but you're also having some sort of social media or statistics or something that individual person, because they are all individual people that have different wants and needs and likes, something that they will engage with, and the sponsorship becomes an accompanying element to that. And I think that's really important note that people should consider when they're thinking about how they're sponsoring in large public venues, large venues.
Yeah, I mean, all that being said, when we think about a sporting venue, the question that we often ask is, okay, so what time do the doors open, and what time do the doors close? Right. So if you say, most venues are open for, 4 hours, which is, 240 minutes, and you start breaking down how effective a brand is and how long should it be on the screen to deliver that message that Graeme's saying. And so we found is that 15-second mark is, somewhat of the ideal time to be able to create an ad or a message. So then you start asking yourself, okay, well, what do I want my message to deliver? And what's the call to action? And how do I do that in 15 seconds or less? My brand, my message, and my call to action, 15 seconds or less. And so, that's where you start thinking about how you create content and, the differences between what you see at home on a TV ad versus what you see in a stadium. Most ads at home are 10 seconds to you get to really long ones to 30 seconds. But during the course of the ad, they're talking about their brand. No sound means that you have no audio to tell you what you're talking about or what you're trying to deliver. So you have to do it in an effective manner with effective content. And then, just getting back to the menu boards, right? It's, people, back in, years ago, people would think, well, if I go from a static menu board to a digital menu board, that should increase my profitability or revenues that I gain. And for the most part, that's true. But if you take the difference between the ones that were really successful, that were seeing a 50, 60, 70% increase in the amount of food or beverage that they're selling, is based off of how they were advertising their menu boards. So if I walk up in a traditional 3-screen, panel, whether you see it in a concession stand at a movie theater or a mall or, a sporting event, knowing that people start in the center screen, move to the right, then move to the left, your flow with regards to how you're offering and what you're offering should be in that manner, right? Is the ability to direct their eye to be able to focus on specific things that are maybe higher margin in value for you, or promotional things. It's all about what you do with the signage to deliver your message versus just, and we've seen this in the early days, and Graham's seen it way more than I have, but we've seen in the early days where people would take the golden arches and make it digital and go, there you go, we should expect more. And you're like, what? There's so you've taken a static ad and made it static, that rotated through, right? What you're doing there to promote people to go down, leave the venue and go down to McDonald's and buy your Big Mac is the magic behind how you create the content.
Just a concept here, and I'm thinking this through, is we consume food in different ways depending where we are. For example, you sit down at a sit-down restaurant, the first thing they ask you is, what do you want to drink? Right? And then you do your main and your dessert. But when you're at a concession, you don't usually, you may start with what you want to drink, but you don't always start with, maybe you're like, I'll have fries and a hot dog and a beer, or what have you. So to Ken's point, when you start to think about how the menus are laid out, when they look at the middle, we know they look at the middle, then they obviously read, and depending on the geography, of course. If you're in the Arab world, they read the other way, right? But if you're reading, let's say in North America or Europe, center, right, and then left again. So what's the right menu? Is it food or is it drinks? That really depends on how the person and the people and your customer are engaged. If you're at a specific, maybe it's like just a liquor beer bar or like a bar, you might want to have beer because that's the majority of your customers, and then the wine over on the left and the hard liquor on the left, for example. But when you're thinking about a concession, if it's like, that's where we really work with customers to understand, what are you selling here most? Because if you're selling a lot of hot dogs and food, and the beer is and the drinks are kind of secondary, that's when you put the drinks on the left side and the food on the right. But it could mix around depending on the habits of your customers. So just an interesting side note.
Yeah, look, high margin, value, profitable foods. There's different profits in different foods. Look at a churro. I don't know what a churro costs to make, but it's got to be measured in pennies, versus dollars. But they're selling it in dollars. I can guarantee you that, especially if you go to a theme park. And so if that's what I want to promote, then where should I put it? We always, when we talk about our own solution here in Vision Edge, we treat that the background as that canvas, and then we put something over the top even, especially if it's some kind of high margin. I want you to pay attention. If I, going back and forth, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to pay attention to that, and then all of a sudden I'm going to bundle it with a price, and then I'm going to put a sense of urgency behind it as to, buy now and, and save, type of thing, or put a clock on it to say, before the game starts or whatever. These are all wonderful things you could do. We're all talking about content, right? It's the same thing, right? It's just digital signage, but we've just, for the last 10 minutes, talked about a menu board and what you should be doing or what you should be thinking. I would just add that, when you're considering a digital platform, don't limit yourself. Don't limit yourself to the ability to just create an L bracket. And we were doing L brackets 10 years ago, right? Invest in a system that's going to pay you back. And it might cost you a little bit more up front, but what you can generate in the returns and the profitability of your system over time is going to pay back tenfold. But if you limit your decisions up front by going with an inexpensive system that's limited in functionality, you should expect limited results because of it.
It's interesting, Ken, you mentioned not treating it like an L bracket or a static image that we've just digitized and it's still static. I this better than I, but there's takeovers at some of these events where every screen turns a certain color, and that maybe it's the high margin offering, or maybe it's a sponsored offering. The entire area now has a feel that's different, even though it's just color and there's no noise. The entire area within that venue suddenly feels completely different because you've changed everything in it, and it makes it so that it's not just that static image. All of a sudden the literal feel of the environment changes.
There's some really great one particular venue that jumps to mind that did a really wonderful job of this is TD Garden. So TD Garden has two tenants, one being the Bruins and one being the Celtics. They're very different color palettes and very different types of content that are played at those different games. And so what they did was they put screens in a lot of places and they painted the walls white, right? So the walls in the concourse are completely white everywhere. The floor is white, everything's white, which means now when you go from one event to the other, they look entirely different. Like that venue looks completely different from a Celtics game to a Bruins game. So that can be translated into what you're describing, which is like a moment of exclusivity where you're taking over a certain area to do some sort of sponsorship activation. That kind of concept where you can control all the screens as a canvas and you can change it to a specific look and feel. You can influence the lighting through the network. You can influence other systems through triggers, etc., which is all part and parcel of what we do on a regular basis. Doing that allows you to really have a canvas. And that's taking advantage of a lot of the capabilities of the Vision Edge system and the various Cisco platforms that are in the building. But that's really compelling, and it is breaking through that white noise that we were talking about to be able to really get compelling advertising. And this is where advertisers, that's what they want to do. That's why they're there. That's why the advertisers are spending money with the teams, to be able to really leave an impression, whether it be with the person themselves or leave an impression on social media, which is also important.
Yeah, if you want to, so we constantly try to evolve ourselves, right? So if you subscribe to the theory of how do you become a millionaire, it's to take somebody else's idea and make it 10% better, right? What we were doing years ago with LBRAC is to what we're doing today with dynamic digital content to what we're going to do tomorrow. So the venues of the future will not just be digital signage, from a dynamic digital content perspective. Everything now is on the network, right? Put everything on the IP network. Your audio is over IP, which your lighting is over IP, which is controllable, and your digital canvas is over IP. All that being said, when you go over IP, you then have control, right? We've all seen it in the comfort of our own home. In our own homes, we can control the lights, when they come on, when they come off, what color they are. The venue of the future will take a VIP club area and they'll do what Graeme says. We'll change the lights. So if it's Coca-Cola, we're going to change the lights to red. You're going to hear that bottle cap come off the top of that bottle, and you're going to hear that fizz, of the Coke. Then visually, let's just knock over that Coca-Cola bottle, and we'll see Coke spreading to all the screens that we have around the venue. And as the level of soda, increases on the screens and the bubbles start coming up, there's going to be no doubt that you are in the Coca-Cola lounge, right? So if you think about it, we went from static Coca-Cola bottle to L bracket with Coca-Cola to moving the Coca-Cola bottle around to now taking advantage of all of our senses, something that, Disney taught us years ago, right? When we walk down Main Street and they're pumping the smell of popcorn, through our noses to get us, like I didn't want popcorn, but now I absolutely I want popcorn. I mean, this is the whole idea. It's what they're building in Las Vegas right now with with the Sphere project. It's an IMAX theater. Don't watch the screen, immerse yourself in the screen, right? Your seats will move. They'll spray stuff at you. You'll smell it. It is an immersive experience. And I believe that, brands will be willing to pay for that, right? So that you take your brand campaign to a whole new level. It's not that we can't do it. We can do it today. It's just who's going to be the first, right? Who's going to take that leap? And I guarantee you the success that they have, others will follow.
Yeah, that's pretty compelling stuff there. Folks, if you've heard anything again that is piquing your interest, please do click the links down below and ask any follow-up questions, and we will try to get back to you as soon as we can. Ken, you are already prepared for this, so I'm going to get you off the hook and send this one Graeme's way, as I have not prepped him at all, but it is my favorite time of every podcast. Graeme, this is a question I didn't prep you for. But it's one that if you are like everybody else that joins this podcast, you thought last night, okay, this is what they're going to ask. This is how I'm going to answer. And you started to rehearse that a little bit. And inevitably, I didn't ask that. I just don't follow the script well enough. So my question to you is simply, if you have one thing that this audience should take away, what is it?
Well, I was just thinking about when Ken's talking about content and talking about doing all these compelling things. And I know that if I was listening to the podcast, I'd be thinking, okay, do I need like 75 people to do this? Right? Like, is that am I going to need an army of people? And I think the one thing that I would have people take away from the podcast is no. I mean, what we know now and what we're doing now, how we're automating content, how we're starting to build tools and have tools that are available to make omni-channel content, how we're able to control screens, centrally controlled screens, like the World Cup, having every single screen controlled by two people on thousands and thousands of screens. So the ability to do this stuff doesn't require an army. And I think that's my one compelling, hopefully, takeaway for people is that you can do this. With the right tools, you can have compelling content play across multiple screens and really activate and sponsorship activation, marketing activation, and really engage and make great fan experiences and customer shopper experiences for your customers with very limited staff. And I think that's the one big takeaway. I think.
That's good. Good point.
Well, Ken, you know the routine. It's your turn. What did I not ask you? What do you want people to take away from this podcast?
Look, when I was younger and I'd go to Vegas, I'd find, the table that was $5 minimum bet, because I didn't want to, the risk was too high to sit at a $25 table. Now, if you think about that theory, if I sat down at the table and let's just say that I enjoyed success, meaning I won 2 out of every 3 hands, my return on my $5 investment would be significant. Maybe I invested, I started out low and I walked away with, a couple $100. But if I were to take, and sit down at that $25 table or the $50 minimum bet table and I enjoyed the same amount of success, I'd be walking home in a whole lot better mood. Everything being the same, right? Same table, same club, same winning percentage, but I invested a little bit more up front and my return was much greater in the back end. I think that that's a message that, can translate to this conversation today. Sometimes you get into this mode of maybe the risk is too high for me to invest a little bit more money on a system that allows me to do a little bit more. But I would argue that there's plenty of experience that, can be brought to the table with regards to what works versus what doesn't. So that risk is minimalized to the reward on the back end, so that you might spend a little bit more up front, but you can expect a whole lot greater returns on the back end if in fact you make the right investment.
That's awesome. And something that you both said there, I have had the privilege of doing this podcast for a few years now, and I'm always amazed when we have partners on, because if you took a step back and just listened to the conversation, you'd swear it's the same company talking. The partnerships are so intertwined, and everybody's looking for the same goal. And something you both said there was that the reality is our customers aren't alone either, because we would be their partners along the way. And I'm assuming that's what you were saying there, Ken, is risking a little bit, using our knowledge, using our experiences and things along those lines to help them propel forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, I learned this from John Chambers many years ago. He would sit in front of our partners and say, when we invest in a partnership is an investment for life. It's not a transactional thing for us. It's truly, your success allows for my success, and my success is to be able to tell your story time and time again. You made an investment into this, and your returns were great, and let's tell the world about it. What excites me, so that's from the customer side. What excites me about working with Wipro is you have a really big company here at Cisco that is 80,000 people strong, and we invest nearly $7 billion in R&D every year, and then you add on a company like Wipro that we've been working with for 25 years, with all kinds of different product lines within Cisco, 120,000 people. So you have two great, gigantic companies, all with a vested interest in making the end user successful, right? What's better than that, right? I mean, look, Danny, if you and I were talking on this podcast alone, that'd be great. You would get my point of view. But what made it better was Graeme and my point of view. Right? We both come at it, we were talking about the same platform. We're coming at it from a different angle, right? And hopefully the listeners on today's podcast see that, one, we're very passionate about what we do. We believe in this solution. We know that you could be successful, but the ability to work with Graeme and learn from Graeme every day, and his expertise of being the one that actually used the system with sporting venues all over North America, gets me excited, but the power of all of us coming together is how do you lose? How do you lose if you're an end user, right?
And I think that's why neither Ken nor Graeme remembered their coffee for this coffee and conversation, because they're so passionate. Okay, there we go. It's just Ken. Ken tends to have a lot of energy, and he's trying to calm himself down.
It's not coffee. It's not coffee. Let me just tell you. Friday afternoon, boys. Coffee was for the morning. Yeah, no, all good.
Well, I want to say thank you to you both for spending this time with us. I know I learned a lot, and I do feed off your guys' passion. It gets me going, and I think our customers and listeners will as well. Again, if there are any questions, please insert those down below, and do click on those links. There's a ton of valuable information on there that dives much deeper into everything that we just spoke about here. And if you'd like to hear more from these guys, please let us know that too. I'd love to have them back on the podcast. Awesome. Thank you both.
Yeah, thanks for getting together.